slight technical hitch there. Welcome to the Woking Borough Council Planning Committee for September the 9th, 2020. The meeting has been held using Teams video conferencing system as a result of the current restrictions on public meetings. The Planning Committee consists of 11 elected members who are borough councillors, who are supported and advised tonight by a variety of professional officers. Tonight we have Justin Turvey, who is the Operational Manager for Development Management, Mary Severin, the Borough Solicitor, who is here to give us any guidance on legal matters, Callum Wernham, who is the Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to this meeting, myself, Chris Bowring, the Vice Chairman of the Committee. I will be chairing the meeting this evening, Roger Johnson, the Senior Highways Assistant Engineer, and the 4 case officers who will present the 4 applications we are hearing this evening: Graham Vaughan, Sanjuti Manna, Baldeep Pulahi and Simon Taylor. We have, I believe, apologies from 2 of them, 11 members, so we have 9 members of the committee here this evening. This is a quasi-judicial committee with formal set procedures, and I would ask everyone to comply with my guidance and instructions on that. While we don't have people physically present to speak as we normally do, those people who have registered to speak will be able to do so using the Teams facility. Registered public speakers will be invited to address the committee at the appropriate time. Registered speakers must not speak other than when invited to do so, and should ensure that their microphone is muted and that their webcam is turned off when not addressing the committee. Repeated interruptions by registered speakers may result in the person or persons being removed from the Teams call, relinquishing their opportunity to address the committee. Following the planning officer's presentation and the contribution from registered speakers, the planning committee members will consider, question and seek clarification on the application we're discussing, and we hope we'll be able to reach a decision which may or may not agree with the planning officer's recommendation. Finally, our role is to determine any valid planning application using prevailing local and national planning policies and guidelines. Our role is not to suggest changes to schemes, whether they're a good idea, whether they're needed, or whether they're too costly, or whether there are alternative uses. We're obliged to make our decisions on what is submitted this evening. So, with those preliminary remarks, we move on to the agenda and item 19, which is apologies for absence. Callum, please.
Yes, Chairman. Apology submitted from Councillors Stephen Conway and Pauline Jorgensen. Thank you.
Agenda item 20, minutes of the previous meeting. Members.
Yes, Chairman, can I make a comment on that?
Malcolm, go ahead, please.
Yes, on page 7, they're 2 minor points, but they're
Which
more
page, sorry?
They are 2 minor points, but they more accurately will reflect what I said. Page 7, 3rd paragraph down, says I asked whether a vending machine could go in the park and ride thing. I said refreshment machine, vending machines. So there's a slight difference, a whole parade of them. It was refreshment machines on page 7, paragraph 3. And the second one, have you got that point?
Yes.
Second point is on page 17, 4 or 5 paragraphs down. I queried whether a proposed layout was okay. What I queried was whether different layouts of the pitches would be acceptable rather than just the one that's there. Would different proposed layouts of pitches be acceptable rather than just proposed layout, different ones? Okay.
Fairly minor adjustments.
So, yeah, it's worth having, because it's.
No, that's fine. You've got those,
fine,
Callum?
thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I think on page 17, again, the penultimate paragraph, there may have been a slight misreading of Justin's comment, I believe, with regard to the Dittons. Is there a change there to be made?
Thank you, Chris. Again, it's very brief. I think the minutes state that I'd said Ditton's residential properties are terraced. I think looking at the recording, what I'd said was that there are terraced houses. It's just to confirm that there are a mix of properties. Okay,
so could we deal with those 3 fairly innocuous changes for accuracy? Thank you. If no other points, then declarations of interest, please.
Yes, please, Chair. That's Andrew Mickelburn here. I declare an interest in application 210370, 20 Pitts Lane. I was a member of the ETC Planning Committee that made a recommendation on this application, but believe I'm able to participate in the discussion and determination of the application before us tonight without any predetermination or predisposition.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Simon, I think you have some.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you, Chairman. I'm declaring an interest on the first item, 166 Nine-Mile Ride, because at the last meeting I spoke against this application, and therefore I will not be participating in this decision, even though it's in my ward. And secondly, the second application for land adjacent to Wise Hill Lodge. I've been working with Wokingham Area Housing Society for a number of years in the delivery of affordable housing in the borough, and I've worked very closely with them on this, and I will be speaking in support of the application. So I will be acting as board member in so doing, but I will not participate in the discussion or vote on either of these items. Thank you.
Okay, Simon, that's very clear. If you can both lower your hands, please. And item 22, are there any applications to be deferred? Sorry, who's that?
Hello? Michelle.
Oh, Rochelle, sorry, I didn't realise you wished to speak.
Okay. Was I supposed to get to the for the so therefore I will be taking care.
You sound like, I'm sorry, hang on, Rochelle, you sound like a Dalek, at least to me.
Yeah, apologies, Rochelle. Your microphone is, well, completely inaudible is how I would describe it. I don't know if you've got a different one available.
How about now?
Oh, much better.
Is this better?
That's fine.
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead,
I've taken off okay, I will not be taking part in the discussion since I was unable to attend the site visit. So therefore, I don't think I can make a fair decision. So therefore, I will not be taking part in that at all.
That's on 166 Nine Mile Road.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Okay. There's no one else with a declaration. Item 22, applications to be deferred or withdrawn. Justin.
None, Chairman.
No. 23, application 201143, which is land adjacent to 166 Nine Mile Ride, which was deferred from the previous planning committee meeting for a site visit. 6 members of the committee attended, and I believe Gary and Angus have also had a private visit themselves. And this is on page 19. Case officer is Graham Vaughan. So Graham, can we have your presentation, please?
Yep, I'll do it now. Can you all see that?
Could see you.
Oh.
Maybe. Yes, we're okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. So the site is located to the south of 9 Mile Ride. It is mostly bordered by properties along this road, including 166 9 Mile Ride and dwellings at the Dittons. In policy terms, the site is within countryside. However, the use for 4 gypsy and traveller pitches is well established. Members considered the application at the last committee and deferred the item due to concerns regarding the layout of the scheme. As such, I will highlight the main changes to the scheme. On the 4th of September, members visited the site in light of changes to the site layout. Specifically, parking has been demonstrated on each pitch should it be required. The space between pitches 5, 6 and 8 is shown as being able to accommodate a caravan, albeit one would not be stationed there. And similarly, swept path analysis shows that they can be located onto each pitch. Concern was also raised with regard to the proximity of caravans to the boundary with properties at the Dittons. The amended layout plan shows the static caravans at a distance of 5 metres from the boundary edge, when previously this was 2.5 metres. Additional landscaping is also indicated, and both of these elements can be covered by condition. In members' update, there is clarification on the summary of the report on page 19 of the agenda. As such, subject to the signing of a legal agreement and the conditions set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. We have just one speaker, and that's Councillor Simon Weeks, who's speaking against as local member for Fitch South. Simon, please.
Yeah. Right. Good evening, members. And thank you for those of you who, well, all of you who attended the site visit at 166 Nine Ride last Friday. And thank you to the officers for making the arrangement, because this was our first site visit since prior to lockdown. 11 local residents and Wokingham Borough Council all objected to this scheme originally. Wokingham Borough Council has an 11-year land supply of gypsy and traveller sites, so this application could be considered premature, as no unmet need has been proven. We originally considered this application last month, when we considered it, a primary concern, and if not the primary concern, was the proximity of the proposed new mobile homes to properties at the Dittons. At the site visit, we actually learned that the mobile homes had been moved further away from the boundary. Whilst this is an improvement, it is unclear whether the objectors have been informed of this revised layout. But as none have appeared to have informed their objections, I reiterate those objections and cannot support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So on to members. I'm not sure whether I'm viewing the raising of hands here. I can't see any hands raised. Can you raise your hand if you wish to speak? I can see Andrew, so I'll start with you, Andrew, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The site visits answered the questions that I raised at our last planning committee meeting. I thank the ward member for his contributions tonight, and I'll give them considerable thought. Unless other members raise other matters that I've not yet considered, though at the moment I'm probably minded to support approval of the application.
Thank you, Andrew. Carl.
Thank you, Chair. Right, yes. I think the first thing I said last time was that I recognise the point that there was no specific planning reason preventing this increase in pitches, which I was surprised about, but considering what Councillor Weeks just said about the 11-year supply. And it was in the local plan update as a place where there would be extra pitches. So, yeah, I think it's difficult to kind of vote it down on that basis. I did have concerns about the layout, but they seem to have been, I think, assuaged by what happened. The only thing I will say is that I'm still a bit concerned about the gap to the residents the sides of the Dittons there, because if it's too far away, that's going to turn into the amenity space. And obviously, at the same point, you don't want it to be too close either. So I think it's something. I think Councillor Weeks was intimating that when he said that he wasn't sure whether those objectors had seen that new layout. So I'm kind of still in two minds, minded to say yes, but I'll wait to see what other people have to say.
Okay, thank you, Carl. I can't see any other hands up. If someone else, I can see Angus has come on. Yes. Yes, Angus, please. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two points I'd ask for officer comment on. One is whether we could consider, as a planning committee, the 11-year supply as a reason for refusal. And the other is a comment about my one concern is were we to agree what's shown on the plan now, and the distance from the Dittons being the most important part of that, how enforceable is that?
Okay, Angus. I think we have to, as a general matter of planning policy, we do have to show harm. So the fact I'll ask officers for comment on this, but the 11-year housing supply is not sufficient, is it? Because you do need to show that this would have been damaging, that would cause harm in planning terms. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. The fact that we have a supply, you can't simply say that then you can refuse, because as you say, you have to demonstrate why it's harmful in planning terms.
Okay, thanks.
Chair, yeah, in very blunt terms, not having a supply is a reason to approve, but having a supply isn't a reason to refuse.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you very much. Gary. Oh, sorry, Angus, if you wanted to come back.
Sorry, I had two questions.
I beg your pardon, Angus, carry on.
One was the other one. I'm very surprised at that comment because it would seem that we could have unlimited sites, but I know that's not part of this application. But no, the other question was about the enforceability of the site and the positioning of the caravans, especially relating to the Dittons.
Okay. So we could take it. These are not indicative positions. These are absolute positions, are they not? And if they are moved, then that would possibly warrant enforcement action. Is that correct?
So the caravans themselves can move within the site. However, in relation to this one, we have recommended a condition which states that for, I think it's pictures 5, 6, 7, that no caravan shall be placed within 5 meters of the boundary with the distance or a compass point, etc. So at that point, that bit does become enforceable, and I would say that if it was noticed that something looked closer than 5 meters, I don't think that it's that difficult to go on the site and quite literally measure it. So I would say yes, it's an enforceable condition.
Is that the aspect of the application you were concerned with, Angus, being too close to the boundary?
Well, I'm delighted that they've been moved further away, Chairman, but I was just concerned as to the officer's view about whether that could be sustained in the future.
It seems to be a yes, I think. Okay, so I move on. Gary, please.
Yeah, thank you. Not being at the last meeting, I'm reading the report. There seems to be about 3 different reports here. So I'll be moving from various pages to try and establish some facts. On page 16, the current council need for pitches is identified as 5.5 pitches. Simon makes the point that we've got 11-year housing land supply for gypsy caravans, and so if Simon says we have more than 5 years, and the officers say we need 5.5 years, I need to get that point clarified. And the other point is, though, was with reference to CP 11, the officer report says it may be in conflict with CP 11. I thought it's in conflict or it's not in conflict, and if it's in conflict, we're agreeing to some sort of variation. Clarify the point that just been made on page 17 about semi-detached and caravan proximities, which I'd found was rather odd. And there's a reference to the sang, but Rook's Nest is an appropriate sang which would reflect and deal with the issues through a legal agreement on the sang. One of the conditions on the report was that there should be stalls for cycles, and I find that very odd because I've never seen a traveller on a cycle in my life. But having said that, would it be more appropriate to make that not so much a condition but an advisory note, and perhaps we should look at electric charging points on the site? And once I get some answers to that, I will sort of form an opinion. Thank you.
I thought we dealt with the 11-year supply of land for gypsy encampments. That is acknowledged by the officers, but we do need to show harm. Is that correct, Graham?
No, it's just the fact that Simon said we had more than, what was the page reference? Simon on page 30 makes a reference that we had more than 5 years, and the officers said there was actually 5.5 caravans needed on page 16. Well, neither of them work with an 11-year number. So I really want clarification from the officers. Is it 11 years we have at the moment or not? What's the precise figure?
What's the current supply at the moment, Graham?
It is 11. I'm slightly confused as to what page we're looking at in terms of that, though. So
You were talking about page 17, which is in the minutes.
on the September agenda. Yeah.
Are you reading the right agenda?
Yeah, the problem I've got is there are 3 different reports all jumbled in together. Nobody has really tied it up and come up with one report. On page 16, on the 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down.
Gary, page 16 is in the minutes.
Yeah, well, I can work from the minutes, can I, or not?
Oh, you're referring to the minutes. I see. Okay.
Yes, page 16 of the minutes.
Right, I'm with you.
And page 30 on the minutes. There are 2 different references to caravan.
Oh, you've muted yourself, Gary.
And that was deliberate. I was waiting for an answer.
Could you run that again? Sorry, Gary.
There's 2 different numbers. There's 2 different numbers. Page 16 of the minutes makes one reference to 5.5, and page 30 makes a reference to more than 5 years. And yet the officers are talking of 11 years. I just really want clarification. What's right? What's wrong?
Well, one is the need, and the other is the supply. The current council needs pitches. The need is 5.5, and we have a supply of 11, so there's no problem with the supply.
Oh, okay. I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Conflict. Could you comment on the conflict with CP11, which Gary said it's not clear? Do we have a page number for that, Gary?
It appears in the conclusion on page 39.
Right, thank you.
It says there may be a conflict. And I'm saying there should either be a conflict or not a conflict, one or the other.
Sorry, Chris. It goes more to the point that there can be conflicts with parts of a policy, and that's kind of what was meant by what's in the report. So in this case, there are some conflicts, but the scheme does accord with other policies, and in particular, policy TB10 of the MDD local plan. And through assessing the application, we are giving greater weight to the accordance with that policy.
Okay, Gary?
Yep, thank you.
You had a question about the SANG, which I didn't quite catch.
No, there's reference to a SANG, and I'm just wondering why should we not consider Rook's Nest as being inappropriate for SANG, in which case there would, I'm guessing there would be a legal charge for the use of it as a SANG. The point is, has Rook's Nest got the capacity to be used as a SANG for this development?
Yes, Rook's Nest does have capacity, and as is typical with schemes that impact on the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area, the applicant is happy to enter into a legal agreement which would secure financial contribution towards the upkeep and maintenance of that SANG, and that will hopefully happen after the committee.
And you had a point about cycle. Go on, Gary.
Sorry, no, the only other point was really, should we have a condition on cycle facilities on the site? Would we not be better off making that an advisory and look at electric charging points?
Okay, great.
So asking for cycle provision is in line with our current policy as required, and the requirement for electric charging points is possibly more slightly emerging point, and we wouldn't really seek it for something on this kind of development at this stage.
Right, that's an emerging policy, is it not?
Yeah, that's me done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Malcolm.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My points overlap some of what Angus has said and something I said earlier this evening. When I made the amendment to the previous minutes on page 17, that was exactly the point I was asking. I queried whether different layouts of the pitches would be acceptable to officers, or was it fixed to one layout? And I basically, from the conversation last time and also from the visit, I've got the impression that they could change the layout as long as they don't breach any of the guidelines about distance from the fence and gaps between the vans and so on. So on the basis that there appear to be enough space to put the additional vans and that there is a condition on gaps from boundaries and protection of trees and spaces between the vans, I find it very difficult at the moment to find a reason to refuse it. I haven't made my mind up exactly, but I'm veering towards approval on this one at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. I haven't got any other hands up that I can see, but maybe there are, and they haven't registered with me. But if there are no others, just if anyone's going to butt in. Yep.
Sorry, I've just seen on page 21 the plan that is referenced in condition 12 just needs to be updated. It needs to be referred to revision F of the plan, I think it is.
Okay, so we need a slight amendment to condition 12.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see anybody proposing any other than the recommendation. So I will go to the vote on page 19. The recommendation is set out there with that slight amendment that Graham has just outlined for condition 12. So can you raise your hand, see if this works? Can you raise your hand if you wish to support the application, please? Ooh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think that is unanimous, is it not?
Yes, Chairman.
That is a unanimous vote. So that application is approved. And we now move on to application 201566, which is land adjacent to Wise Hill Lodge in Fenshamstead. And that's on page 47. And it's Simon Taylor as the case officer. So over to you, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The screen, please. Is that ready for everybody?
Yep, that's fine.
I
guess it's a little dim, but...
Sorry?
Oh, it's okay. Go on, I can read it, yeah.
The application site lies at the western outskirts of the village on the edge of the limited development location of Finchhampstead. A small plot of vacant grassland with mature hedging lining the front boundary and a veteran TPO protected oak tree adjacent to the northeastern corner, and a smaller sycamore tree just over the eastern boundary. I'll just quickly refer to those trees in photographs. There's the oak tree as viewed from the road. Both these trees fall outside the property boundary within the adjoining garden of Wise Hill Lodge to the east. Surrounding development comprises mostly residential development to the north and east, which is within the settlement limits, and countryside to the south and west. The land that forms the application site was bequeathed by a local landowner for affordable housing for key workers in the first instance and for those with a local connection to the village. The proposal being advanced by the Wokingham Area Housing Authority, is to build a two-storey flat building comprising 4 one-bedroom units of standardised layout with parking for 4 vehicles and access from the roadway. It is proposed as a rural exception site, which is a development on the edge of settlement boundary for affordable housing as defined in policy CP 9 and 11 core strategy. The proposal accords with these requirements. It follows a 2017 pre-application and a subsequent 2019 refusal, the latter considered unacceptable due to a lack of supporting information in terms of localised need, ecology issues and access, impact upon the character of the area, harm to trees, lack of parking and amenity space, as well as poor boundary fencing. Council has worked closely with the Wokingham Area Housing to advance the application, including Council's housing department. This application is a resubmission, which aims to resolve these concerns, which does the housing needs survey completed along with the test, and there are certain methodology in some, but it is concluded that there is sufficient demonstration of a localised and demonstrated need.
Chairman, that was unintelligible.
Oh, is that the general opinion?
Chris,
There is a bit of a buzzing noise going on. I don't know whether it's something
Yes,
you're
it
inside.
was. It was very difficult to hear it.
I'll go on mute and see what happens.
Chris, I think it might be when your microphone is unmuted.
You want me to mute my microphone?
Yeah, try that if you would.
Shall I continue?
That sounds better.
That sounds much better.
There have been other cumulative changes that have resolved character bulk issues, whereas consistent form in the street scene and other documentation has addressed ecology and access matters. The application has the support of 6 neighbours, the ward member and the parish council, and 3 objections against. Most raise the importance of the affordable housing as a positive outcome, and this is not understated. However, it is the planning officer's view that the application is a matter of weighing the benefits of additional affordable housing against the harm to the oak tree. The tree is TPO protected and nominated as a veteran tree, which is a tree that, because of its age, size and condition, is of exceptional biodiversity, cultural heritage value. In this case, it forms an important consideration, landscape consideration at the entrance to the village. Paragraphs 54 to 62 of the officer report summarise the harm, but in short there is dispute in relation to the likely root protection area of the tree, and therefore it is the landscape officer's view that the incursion of the building into the tree's root protection area, arising from the building, the access and the parking, and the associated no-gig solutions that will pose unacceptable harm, and this weighs against the proposal. Lack of amenity space forms another reason for refusal, as does a lack of a legal agreement in reasons refusal 3 and 4, but these would be resolved were the application recommended for approval. Other primary concerns relate to lack of parking, which is policy compliant, and lack of detail in the housing survey. It is important at this point that I refer to the members' update and further correspondence from the agent. The summary of submissions in page 50 incorrectly suggests that submission from Wisehill Farm is in support. The most important significance in that statement is that the fact that the local shop, which lies about 90 metres to the west of the site, to the east of the site, sorry, you'll view it in the settlement edge there, has since closed during the current the existing lockdown arrangements, and this weighs against it in terms of site sustainability, but it does not render it unacceptable. The agent has correctly also noted that paragraph 25 refers to the site being 0.49 hectares when in fact it is 0.049 hectares. This has some bearing in terms of the assessment of the sequential test. There's also typos at paragraphs 104 and in terms of if the site is sustainable and it is for 4 dwellings. They've also confirmed that they are willing to enter into a legal agreement were it to be approved. I would also add at this point the Council's Landscape and Trees Officer is in attendance this evening to answer any relevant conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Right, it's gone very quiet. I couldn't hear the end of that.
We can hear you, Chris, and I didn't have any audio issues.
Okay. I know Angus said he couldn't hear at a certain point. Could the beginning of that not be heard?
I think after you switched off, Chairman, it became clear enough.
Okay. Are you happy I proceed, despite the fact you may not have heard the beginning? If so, we will continue. So, going to speakers. There are 2 speakers. The first is Jim Bailey, who is the agent and he will be speaking in favour of the application. Mr. Bailey, please. Hope you're there. No.
Mr. Bailey's he's just rejoined the call. He might be here now.
I see he is here. Good evening, Mr. Bailey.
Sorry about that. My computer, for some reason, just decided to switch itself off. That's good timing.
Mine does the same thing, so don't worry. Would you like
so
to?
Mine exactly 1 minute in the middle.
You've got 3 minutes to convince us to support this application, please, Mr. Bailey.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Sorry about that. My name is Jim Bailey. I'm a planning consultant working for the Wokingham Area Housing Society. The Society is a local charitable trust run by a team of volunteers to provide affordable accommodation for local people in Wokingham. The Society owns Warren Close in Finchampstead, consisting of 24 one-bedroom flats for affordable rent, which are occupied by over 55s with local links. That's next to the doctor's surgery. The proposal will provide a further 4 one-bedroom flats for affordable rent for local people on land that has been gifted by a local family. The housing needs survey submitted with this application demonstrates that there's a proven need for more accommodation of this type in the area. A previous application was refused last year, and we have engaged in considerable pre-application discussions with your officers, including 2 meetings last year. However, we're disappointed to see that officers are recommending refusal for 4 reasons. With regard to the harm to trees, the impact on the oak tree T1 is unresolved. This is despite our tree consultant with 50 years of relevant experience attempting to engage with the council's landscape officer, who's refused to accept that a scheme of no-dig construction within the RPA of the tree could be successfully implemented, despite there being a considerable body of evidence that it can be. This includes the Society's own scheme at Warren Close, which also adjoins mature trees and has been successfully managed by the Society to date. The tree is considered to be a veteran example. However, it should be noted that the designation of veteran trees is undertaken by volunteers and not qualified arboriculturalists. The applicant has no wish to harm the tree. It is acknowledged that the tree is in poor condition currently, as seen in the photos, and the applicants are prepared to carry out works to the tree to improve its health and well-being with the landowner's permission prior to the commencement of the development. The council could place suitable conditions on the consent to ensure that the tree is protected during construction, and also that works are undertaken to improve its well-being. The lack of amenity space. During pre-application discussions with the planning officer, he agreed that 100 square metres of amenity space would be sufficient for the 4 flats in this location. On this basis, the applicants approached the owners, who gifted additional land to enable 110 square metres of amenity space to be provided. This amount of amenity space is considered to be sufficient, especially in the context of open farmland forming a green outlook for the flats at the rear and the close proximity of the site to the Memorial Hall and Sports Club. Thirdly and fourthly, the Thames Basin Heath and affordable housing could be addressed by a 106 agreement, and the applicants have said that they would be happy to enter into that with the council. It's extremely disappointing that after 30 months of negotiations with council officers, we have reached this point where the application is again recommended for approval. Overall, I urge members to balance the possible harm to the tree, which could be mitigated by no-dig construction secured by conditions, against the proven need to provide affordable housing for local people in a sustainable location, which will create jobs and provide social benefits at a time of severe economic recession. Therefore, the application should be approved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Finally, Simon Weeks speaking as Borough Councillor for Finchampstead South.
Yes, so thank you. Great, thank you. Good evening, members. Unusually tonight, I'm speaking to oppose this application's recommendation for refusal. Wokingham Area Housing Society already provides affordable rental accommodation at Warren Close in Finchampstead for 24 people who could not otherwise afford rent in Finchampstead. Proposal before you tonight is only possible because of land being donated by a generous local family, specifically for the purpose of providing affordable housing for local residents. If approved, the Society already has in place the funding necessary to deliver these much needed units. The need for such affordable housing in Finchampstead has already been established by a detailed housing needs survey that has been undertaken and partially funded by Wokingham Borough Council. And the WBC Affordable Housing team have recognised this rural exception site and are in support of the application, as these affordable homes are provided for rent in perpetuity. The principal reason for recommending refusal is because of an oak tree in an adjoining garden. During last Friday's site visit, members were able to see the tree and its relationship with the proposed building. The council considers this tree as a veteran oak. I disagree, as does the applicant's tree consultant, who has 50 years' experience. At last month's planning appeal by public inquiry to build houses off Finchhamstead Road, the issue of veteran trees was covered in depth by the inspector in paragraphs 61 to 76 of his decision, and he accepted eventually that veteran trees should have a girth of 4.7 metres or greater. He also confirmed the accepted definition of a veteran tree as having decay and damage and other characteristics of a very old tree. A tree adjacent to this proposal has a girth of 3.5 metres rather than 4.7, and when we visited the site, decay and damage was not apparent. The council is concerned that the proposed parking spaces could impact on the root protection area of the tree. It's important that members recognise that we're only talking about potential unquantified risk of damage, as opposed to felling a beautiful mature oak tree. Note that only a small percentage of the root protection area is potentially impacted by the parking spaces. The proposed method of constructing the car park area using cell web is identical to that recently employed at 3 new almshouses that were approved by WBC in Hurst for another local charity. This was also a rural exception site with containing a number of mature trees. Rear garden space is below guidelines, but as you will have seen on the site visit, the proposed setting is verdant in nature and many trees will be visible, adding to the sense of space. Additionally, the splendid Finchhamstead Memorial Park is less than 100 metres away and will provide great additional space for future residents. When making your decision tonight, please remember this is donated land and the full cost of development is met by working area housing for affordable units, which will be provided in a village that is sorely lacking in smaller low-cost units. The nearby oak tree does not meet normal criteria for a veteran tree, and the concerns expressed only relate to potential damage. It is supported by the parish council and myself as ward member, and I would urge you to weigh the significant advantages provided by this scheme very carefully against the potential unquantified risk to the oak tree. The officer's report clearly refers to this as on-balance decision. I really do hope you can support approval tonight. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Simon. Just before we come to the members, this term veteran tree, could I have just a bit of clarification? What is the meaning? Well, first of all, the question of whether it is a veteran tree or not. Simon Weeks suggesting it was only 3.5 metres in girth, whereas it should be 4.7. Is it really the opinion of officers that this is a veteran tree, taking that point into account?
So, Chris Hannington here. Would you like?
Hello, Chris. Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, I can confirm that it is, and I very seldom say this, but the inspector in Finchhamstead was misled and incorrect. I have confirmed with the editor of the veteran tree, ancient and veteran tree management guidance that was referred to in that appeal at length. I've confirmed with Dr. David Lonsdale, who is the editor of that and an acknowledged expert, that the table was misinterpreted and 3.7 is the correct measurement. I can also confirm that the tree appears on the Ancient Tree Index, which is referred to in standing advice from Natural England and Historic England and Natural England, which is the government guidance, the supplementary planning guidance on that. So yes, it is quite clearly a veteran tree, and as I said, I've confirmed it with those measurements with Dr. David Lonsdale. So it's absolutely clear.
Sorry, just make sure I understand. Are you saying that the girth is 3.7, or 3.7 is the figure that you have to reach to make it a veteran tree? So
its age, its size, and its characteristics. Characteristics are very clear and obvious from the more recent damage. And the age and size are closely related for an open-grown tree. 3.7 is the measurement. I can refer you to that in the specific guidance on veteran tree management, and I can provide the committee with an email from Dr. David Lonsdale about that. So I can confirm that yes, it is a veteran tree quite clearly.
It is 3.7.
Well, the girth of the current tree I think is about 3.9, so it's over and above what is.
this figure of 4.7 as the figure to reach is incorrect.
So that is incorrect. Yes, and sadly the inspectorate was misled by the tree expert in the Finch Hampstead Road appeal, I'm afraid. But okay. I have confirmed it with the expert, who is Dr. David Lonsdale, and he's the man for those. So for an oak tree, 4.7 would be heading towards a higher grade. It would be more the ancient tree. Well, I ran a survey of ancient trees when I was at Wealdon District. It was the first one that any local planning authority had done, and we looked at ancient trees at over 4.5 meters. So this tree at 3.9 is getting close to an ancient tree. It's quite
okay.
Big.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Okay, come to members, and first out of the box was Rochelle.
Okay, I have one question just right off the top of my head. On page 49, reason 4 that the officers say for refusal says lack of affordable housing. Now, to the best of my knowledge from what you've just said, all 4 flats are affordable. How in the world is this possible?
Graham? Sorry, Simon.
It's merely a formality because of the lack of a legal agreement. We don't enter into legal agreements if the recommendations for refusal, because it's cost and time expense to all parties.
Yeah, 3 and 4 should disappear were we to approve.
Okay.
Yep. That was your only point, I think, Rochelle?
Yes, it is. On balance, I feel that this is probably a good idea for what we're doing right now.
Okay, Gary.
Oh, thank you. A few points. I'm not really bothered whether it's 3.5 or 4.7, or I'm not really interested in that argument at all, because I think any tree that's is worthy of protection is worthy of protection. But the developer did say that they had no wish to harm the tree, and there's no reason why the officers cannot put in conditions that would mitigate for the protection of the tree and for its condition to be improved by whatever means was appropriate. Because when you think of it, the reference for the refusal says, I'm just trying to find the actual page now, the potential impact, and I find that very strange. Potential is not a very good word. There should be an impact, or there's not an impact. If there is an impact, then one has to look at what mitigation can be put in place to deal with it. If it can't be put in place, then we have a different issue. I would agree with Chris Hannington's comments on what is the girth, but as I said, I don't place any importance on that. There are certain refusal points here that can be dealt with through conditions that we all know, but the bottom line is pretty much as Rachel said, that affordable housing, the provision of 4 houses in this area developed as rural exceptions are a huge benefit to the local community. And if you look at a government document recently, First Homes, where rural exceptions fits in on page 25, paragraph 31 and 32, 250 of the respondents supports the concept of rural exceptions. And Wokingham Borough Council also submitted comments to that. And the change the MPPF to strengthen the ability to be able to provide more rural exceptions. Principally, the only thing is on the tree, and I believe that the tree, as the did say, the tree can be dealt with through mitigation. So I will be supporting this application.
Thank you, Gary. I'm not quite sure what these conditions or condition would be to protect the tree. Can anyone suggest something, or officers? How would this be done?
Well, that's a case for the officers.
Well, yeah, I'm asking members and officers whether I don't know what it could be. But you said there is such a condition, Gary. What would be its solution?
No, what I said was you can't refuse a planning application because the potential harm to something. You've got to be very specific. You could say the harm will be so bad that that tree will be ruined or destroyed and will have to come down. And if the officers can't say that, they should also be in a position to look at how can you protect the tree roots, etc., with respect to what is the surfacing of the surface material being used, etc., etc. They're the professionals. I'm just the amateur. But I believe that it's for them to say why they can't do it.
Okay, Simon, can you comment on that, or maybe Chris Hannington?
Just in short, there is dispute on where the root protection zone is. So the road and a retaining wall to the road and a ditch would result in the roots going further south than what's otherwise implied. So that's the discrepancy in terms of where the root protection zone is. They're proposing a no-dig solution that is achievable. It is the council's view that the harm posed from that is so significant, they're likely to be significant that it warrants refusal. So the British standards and NPPF both outline what is an acceptable level of incursion into the root protection zone, and this exceeds that. That's what the council's basing the refusal on. So it's not it is acknowledging that there's potential harm, but it is recognising that it doesn't meet policy in terms of what would be likely potential harm. So if it were minded, if the recommendation was for approval, it is achievable as a conditionable application. To condition it, council would work with the applicant in terms of a pre-commencement condition to achieve a suitable outcome for the access and how the building is built.
Possibly it's more that we as members have got to use our judgment and arrive at a conclusion. But this is a very difficult application, just for me anyway.
Sorry, Chris, sorry to interrupt. Would you mind if we got the plan from the presentation up, which shows, I think, what was an indicative RPA? Maybe Chris Hannington can talk through it for us and say what his concerns are.
Yes, please.
Simon, can you get the plan up, please?
I'll share the screen and Chris can talk. Yeah. So the darker green on the screen at the moment, I'm assuming everybody can see, is the root protection zone as specified by the applicant.
So Simon, if I could ask you actually to go to the root protection zone that you show a snippet of in paragraph 55 of the committee report. It's the multicoloured one.
Okay. Bear with me.
Sorry about that.
I jumped the gun.
So if I could just point members to that paragraph in the committee report, that's quite helpful. It doesn't include the key, but you'll notice a line of dots in a rectangle surrounding the tree. It neatly runs to the right of the proposed building. It runs through the middle of the road, and it runs into the garden of Wise Hill Lodge to the right of the tree. We don't see the extent to the bottom of the tree, but that is the proposed root protection area from the expert working for the developer. It shows his proposal. Now, the British standard requires a circle. That looks more like a rectangle to me. And members will judge why we find it very difficult to see that a root protection area under a road where the tree's roots will gain no water and very unlikely to gain any nutrients, and particularly as they first have to traverse a ditch to get to it. So we say, the council's experts say, that no, that is not the root protection area. The root protection area is further to the south and is offset, if you like, to avoid the road and the ditch at the front, and will take up more of the site and more of the garden of Wise Hill Lodge than is shown by that rectangular root protection area, which, as I say, doesn't comply with the British standard, which requires a circular area and offsetting for roads and other structures. So we're convinced that there will be harm. Furthermore, the planning policy guidance, standing advice that I've referred to previously, requires a buffer around such trees, which is 15 times the diameter of the tree at 1.5 meters above ground level. Diameter at breast height was the old forester's terminology. That gives you a radius around that tree of 18.75 meters, which takes up the northeast corner of the development. It's not a question of whether there will be harm. There will be harm to this tree. There will be harm to the special characteristics of the tree, the special ecological characteristics of the tree, and the value of the tree. Mitigation may be possible, but it would fly in the face of the government's guidance. And in fact, at paragraph 175 of the NPPF, the government says that exceptions, and it's footnote 58 for those who are interested, the government says that we should, any harm or damage to trees should result in a refusal, and there should only be, unless there are wholly exceptional reasons and a suitable compensation strategy exists. There's no compensation strategy, and there are no wholly exceptional reasons. And an example, the footnote 58 that I was talking about tells you wholly exceptional reasons include infrastructure projects, including nationally significant infrastructure projects. There could be provision of affordable housing on this site, but not in the form and perhaps not in the intensity that is currently proposed. Thank you, Chair.
The path as proposed, the new road into the site is impervious. Is it the impervious nature of the road, or the fact that there's a structure there over the roots which is the problem?
So yes, the British standard says that structures should not be constructed within the root protection area because that will result in harm. The root protection area, I'll remind you, is the minimum required protection area to ensure that the health and the viability long term of any tree, let alone important trees like veterans, which the NPPF says are irreplaceable habitats. And yes, so it is the fact that there's any structure. The other thing about no dig and driveways and pathways, you have to achieve a level, and there's been no demonstration of either where the roots are, for example, by root protection radar, so that it could help us work out what might or might not be possible in a less intensive scheme, but also nothing to help us in terms of levels, because of course you need a level when you're dealing with car parking and cycles and pedestrian access. You can't have these little undulations which the tree has grown up with and adapted to. So we need to be very careful about that. But anyway, the guidance is very clear and the NPPF is very clear.
But just to be clear, what would or could cause damage to the tree is that rainwater wouldn't get through.
So it's not just that, no, sir. It's penetration of water, yes, so that they, die of thirst, if you like, but also rainwater dissolves nutrients, and it's through dissolved nutrients that the tree gets its nutrients, but also it's oxygen permeating into the soil. Problems you do have, yes, these sorts of things can work, but it doesn't allow for the buffer which the planning policy guidance is very clear should be, as I say, 15 times the diameter, which is 18.75, I think I mentioned, 18.75 from the tree, which, as I say, takes in the northeast corner of the building. Right, so it's not just the car parking and cycleways.
And there's no way of making the drive more pervious so that rainwater gets through. That's not, we can't condition that.
So also the guidance is clear that this should be a natural area and not include, it says specifically not include gardens, but I think car parks and cycle stores are probably more invasive. So again, shouldn't, that's what the guidance says, sir.
Okay, that's thank you very much, Chris, for that clarification. Right, I've got a queue now. Sorry, I was talking too much there. So Andrew, please.
Yes, thank you. I have quite a number of questions, and I'd like to start off with, and I'm still mulling over all of this very important additional information about the tree. My first question relates specifically to the kind of paving that would be in the parking area. Am I right in saying that this would be some form of greencrete, you know, that would allow some water to penetrate? And if so, what proportion, you know, of rainfall falling onto such an area is likely to filter through to the roots of such a tree? How much would become runoff and likely to go outside the root zone of the trees? I've also I see that there were 3 objections, including a new objection received from Wise Hill Farm. Could officers please clarify the location of that property in relation to the application site, including any shared boundaries, because I couldn't see it on any of the documentation that we had. Officers concluded the proposals meet the requirements as a rural exception site. I understand these sites seek to address the needs of a local community by accommodating households that are either current residents or of existing family or employment connection. Are there any other criteria for a rural exception site besides the need to adjoin an existing settlement boundary and a demonstrated genuine need for affordable housing in the locality? The member's update states the application site was, quote, discounted from the sequential test, but there are references on pages 58 and 59 to the sequential test having been conducted. Could officers please clarify this? And finally, the drainage officer has raised an objection following concerns relating to an assumption about the infiltration rate. What are the potential practical consequences to this site and for neighbouring properties if the development was to go ahead and concerns relating to the infiltration rate were realised? Thank you.
I'll answer what I can. I think one of the answers would be better answered by Chris. I will share the screen just to demonstrate the location of Wise Hill Farm for you. Is that on the screen at the moment? At the very bottom of the aerial map here, you'll see a collection of buildings. It's slightly further south than that is Wise Hill Farm. So it's not immediately adjoining the property. It does have access alongside Wise Hill Lodge to on the village road.
Thank you. Yep.
Rural exception site, in terms of policy CP9 and CP11 have 2 criteria, which is be adjacent to a limited or modest development location, which this is, and they need to demonstrate a localised need through the sequential test and through the housing needs survey. So they're the 2 primary policy requirements. There are additional issues. It still needs to meet all the other policy requirements, but it does meet those 2 requirements. This site does form part of a site that was put forward by in the local plan update for inclusion in the local plan. It was discounted, so this site forms a very small proportion of that wider site. It's 11 hectares. It extends all the way down to Longwater Lane and over the road of Longwater Lane. So in that sense, it was considered in the sequential test, but excluded because the overall site was much larger than what was required. So there is a bit of confusion in terms of it's considered itself and then discounted itself, but it is only one small portion of the wider site. The drainage officer has raised concerns about the infiltration rates. I've confirmed with the applicant they have not done infiltration testing at present. The drainage officer does occasionally raise concern with that inadequate information. It was felt in this case, as it is in some other cases, that sorry, bear with me. Am I still being able to hear? Good.
We can hear you, Simon.
Okay, no, I've just been logged off, so it may cause a problem. The drainage officer has asked for additional information. It's felt that pre-commencement requirement will resolve that concern in this instance. the concern of the neighbour is in relation to the ditch and the access to the site imposing on the natural flow of water in the ditch. That could be conditioned as well as a matter of a pre-commencement requirement.
Andrew?
Yes, that's fine. I think it would be good, perhaps, if we could consider Simon's comment about possible conditioning relating to the flow of water in that neighbouring ditch culvert.
Yes, if that relates to the size of the culvert that's being used. If it's going to impede flow for other properties or down or upstream, then it's a matter of looking at what size culvert's required. I just note that I haven't answered the question in relation to the greencrete or what surface proposed.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, it is not specified. It will clearly be some permeable material, and that would be conditioned if recommended for approval. I'd pass comment on to Chris in terms of what that would achieve in terms of implications through to the tree roots.
Okay, thank you. Can I pass on, Andrew? If you're happy,
yeah.
I'll come back.
Can Chris comment on the on water infiltration through concrete, grasscrete, or similar type of surface?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Councillor. I'd again refer you to there's two things to it. Yes, you can technically have solutions that will allow adequate penetration of water. The difficulty is that you can't do that where there's a building, and I'll refer you again to paragraph 55 of the minutes of the officer report. And you will see the position of the oak adjacent to the ditch, and I'll come back to that later. You will see the oak. You will see a gap between that and the access road. You'll see the access road, which is marked and measured at 5.5 metres. The gap is roughly 5 metres. So you can imagine where the 15 metres required by the root protection area under the British standard, not the unusual rectangular root protection area used by the applicant's expert in this case, but the circular root protection area, and again offset to the south, which will mean more incursion into the area currently occupied by the proposed new dwelling. So yes, you can get, if you can get the levels right, and there's no evidence to suggest that that is the case. But if you can get the levels right, then you can get permeable solutions, which will allow water to get through to the tree roots. But you can't do it where there is a building, and quite clearly that building falls within the British standard root protection area, which I repeat has a radius from the oak tree of 15 metres. And again, slightly more than that, because you'll see that the expert for the applicant includes part of the road as a place where he feels that there'll be quite a lot of roots. In fact, he undermines himself in his own tree survey, where he says that there will be offsetting of the rooting area to the south. He agrees with us that that's the case. In terms of the drainage and how we might condition that, again, I'll refer you to that diagram in paragraph 55 of the report, and you'll see that the drainage ditch is extremely close to the oak. If there is any widening or deepening of that ditch, it is extremely likely, and we have no evidence to the contrary, but it is extremely likely that oak tree roots will be damaged. So we're not only damaging to the south and the west, but now, to comply with drainage requirements, we might well be damaging to the north. I just feel that there is insufficient evidence to support the applicant's claim that there will be no harm. In fact, the evidence to the contrary is that there will be harm to this tree, which is called irreplaceable by the National Planning Policy Framework. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay.
Thank you.
Malcolm, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm not an expert in trees, of course, and I hate to come between disagreeing tree officers, but I don't know what, we've talked about the surface. I would have thought gravel.
You've disappeared, Malcolm. You're muted. Oh, everybody's muted. Yeah.
Get off mute. Am I?
You're okay now. You're okay. Yeah.
How much did you hear? Just the last couple of seconds.
Oh, start again.
Okay, right. I'm obviously not an expert in trees. I don't really want to come between arguing tree officers with different levels of knowledge and so on. But in terms of the surface, I found the plan a bit difficult to see. If it had said garden and parking space instead of squares that look like it's a building, I would have known instantly. But there is a possibility, I imagine, that by some arrangements you could have maybe gravel for the bit of driveway or for parking. It doesn't have to be concrete or anything similar to it. So I would have thought gravel, you see gravel all over the place as driveways and parking areas. So there must be ways of achieving that, I think. In terms of if you ignore the tree for the moment and just look at the house aspect of it, if this was a big private development with lots of houses and things in a lovely, pleasant part of the countryside, which it is countryside, then we'd say no. But this is a much more modest for affordable house things, which does not stick out into the road and become an eyesore. It's a very needed thing. We desperately need affordable housing around the area, and also particularly in Finchampstead, it seems. So it's a very modest development. It's been made affordable partly by the very generous donation of land by some landowners in the area there. Since we need the affordable housing, it's managed, it's in the area, it's small, and I think that the argument centering around the tree is pretty well the only reason I can imagine one would have having any doubt at all. But in this particular case, I also agree with Gary's comments that potential damage, it may be happen rather than it will, is worth just giving some thought. At the moment, I think I'm minded to approve this application. Thank you.
Okay, so Chris, can you just deal with the gravel? I think you've already covered this, but just briefly, why gravel would not be a solution to protecting the roots?
Yeah, I think what would be proposed is a cellular solution, which puts down a sort of a cellular web, and that is actually filled usually with gravel. So there's a sort of, yes, the councillor is right in that. In terms of potential harm, I just want to clarify, I believe there would be harm. I consider there would be harm. And yes, the gravel works if the levels are right and in that parking area, but not where the routing area is under the building. And that's where the British Standard Circle routing area says it is. So it's not a question of potential harm. That's a little bit of a red herring, and I suggest a slip of the pen in drafting.
Okay. So what about the routes which already go underneath the road, which is what a metal road and tarmac? Is there any evidence of any damage to the routes by its close proximity to that busy traffic road?
So, Councillor, well, it's unlikely that the route is gaining any water from under the road, because the roads are designed to shed water. That's the point of the camber and the roadside drainage. And it's extremely unlikely there are any major routes there. They might go under the road and into the gardens on the other side. That's a slightly different matter. But the general rule and the guidance in the British Standard is you would offset your circle so that there's more of a protection area on the southern side of the road. So we'd be looking at bigger, firstly not a rectangle, we'd be looking at a circle. And secondly, we'd be looking at more routes to the south of the road and under the area which is proposed for the 4 new flats.
And just a large point on that, since there is a road there and it's over the top and we can't see the route, but there's no evidence by looking at the tree itself that any harm has been caused to damage the trunk and the main body of the tree. And that road, I imagine, has been there for quite a few years. So that's got sort of metal road on it, and there's no evidence of that fed back up damage to the tree. And so if the new development has gravel or something more acceptable on the other side, it's unlikely, I think, on balance there, to have cause any damage, or at least not for many, many years, if at all. So it's only a potential. So same thing again, I think. On balance, I tend to support the benefit of the affordable housing in that area with some changes to protect it as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Angus, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I think during the period from when this agenda was first put out, a number of things seem to have changed and the attitudes have changed. And we now seem to be in a position where we do accept, and I do accept, the need for an acceptability of this rural exception housing here. And so, and we've done it in other places around the borough over the last 20, 30 years, Wargrave, Hurst, somewhere else in Finchampstead. So I think my only concern comes back to this tree. And we've heard various stories, and Chris Hannington has very clearly laid out things only to us tonight, which really hasn't been reflected in what the applicant might be able to put for satisfactory or at least much better protection during the building of and life of this development. The thing about the road fascinates me because it's a very old tree, and for most of the life of that tree, that road wasn't metalled. I think it was only metalled about the time of the Second World War. So in the life of the tree, I guess probably there's a large roof structure which maybe gets water from the other side of the road, but I don't know. I'm not an expert, as other members have said. But that's reflected in questioning the pear-shaped root structure. But Chris Hannington has put square proposals, circular proposals, and therefore I'm left totally confused. And I believe I couldn't support this application as it stands tonight, but I would hope that because the principle of it is good, and I believe there should be a way that we could satisfy the protection of this tree, that we need the applicant to come forward and to show that. And that's where I stand.
Okay, thank you, Angus. Can I just raise a point which hasn't been raised? If we were to approve this, is the tree likely to affect adversely the new building?
So I could probably help you there. That's a very helpful suggestion from Councillor Ross. That, and I think I've already said that, you know, if there was more space between the development and the tree, this might be something that could go forward. One way of finding that out is not by having rectangular root protection areas or circular ones, as the British standard advises, but by actually doing a ground penetrating radar survey to find out where the roots are. This might be difficult because there might be an argument that some of the roots have died recently, but it would certainly give us an idea of where these roots are, and I think that might be a way forward. It's a good technical solution, and I forget the second question or second part of Councillor Ross's question, but perhaps you'll remind me, Chairman.
What actually, I asked you a question, was whether if we prove this, the roots of the tree could damage the new building.
Oh yes, so there is an issue of thirsty species such as oak trees. They are very thirsty species, and we would need to ensure that foundations were constructed in such a way as to ensure there was no damage to the structure from the oak tree. I don't know what the soil is in Finchampstead. I'm guessing it's a little bit sandier, but on heavy clay soils, on shrinkable clay soils, subsidence is an issue. That could be dealt with by foundations of a building that was relocated further away from the tree.
Okay, but I note your comment that it might be possible to make further investigations, maybe using radar to determine where the roots are. Perhaps members could bear that in mind. And we go on to Abdul.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is referred to page 59, paragraph 5.
that could be Simon. It says clearly in your paragraphs, there is a disagreement with process of discounting any site that are more than 0.5 hectare in size. And then again, it says 0.14 hectare would benefit a greater separation from the tree, additional amenity size. So in policy time, could you please explain differential between 0.5 and 0.14? That's one. And my second question is 18.75 meter, if it's a buffer diameters, would the excess which is right near the tree, will it overlap? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Simon or Chris?
So I can quickly deal with the... Simon, shall I deal with the overlapping of the buffer zones? Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
So the overlapping of the buffer zones, yes, the supplement, the government's guidance on ancient and veteran trees, yes, requires a buffer of 15 times the diameter. That's the 18.75 buffer zone. That's basically should be a natural zone with nothing in it. The root protection area, which we've calculated at, should be circled the radius of radius 15 meters. That would be within the buffer zone required for an ancient and veteran tree. So yes, they would overlap on the whole. But we might like to look at the radar results to see exactly. But on the whole, they would tend to overlap.
So my second
just as additional comment to that, off the top of my head, I think it is 11 meters from the tree to the corner of the building. In relation to the sequential test, I have inadvertently compared 0.5 of a hectare and 0.049 of a hectare. So the sequential test discounted any sites that were larger than 0.5 of a hectare because they didn't achieve the intent of a small scale affordable housing development such as this application. Anything beyond that would be surplus to requirements. I've mixed up my figures, so the relevance of that paragraph can be disregarded because it questioned why anything above 0.5 hectares was discounted, but the site is much, much smaller than 0.5 hectares, so I wouldn't refer to that comment, that paragraph of any relevance anymore.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Simon, for your...
Thank you, Abdul. Carl, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions which are for Simon, really, and a few which are for Chris. So I'll give Chris a rest for a moment. So the one for Simon, I need to confirm what form of affordable housing these flats will be. It says affordable. I think, Chris, you need to put your mute button.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yes, it's difficult to notice if you're not actually listening. Obviously, because you won't be. Yeah, we need to confirm what form of affordable housing these flats will be, because it says affordable social rent in the agenda. But when I spoke, I asked that question of Simon. I think Simon Weeks at the visit, and I think he said affordable rent, which of course is something else. So I just want that to be cleared up. Also, does the housing needs survey also take the type of affordable housing required into question or not? So the first question I'm asking is it affordable social rent or not? And the second one is that taken into account in the actual housing needs survey? Is it required to be? Perhaps it's not. And my third question to you is, the previous application was refused on several grounds, one of which was parking, which it's now got around, but simply by changing the parking from allocated to unallocated, with no increase in parking spaces at all. So can you just explain how that has overridden that reason for refusal?
Yep, Simon, please.
Thank you. I can confirm that it is proposed to provide accommodation, this is from the planning statement, accommodation on the site for rent at an affordable level in perpetuity. So it is my understanding to be social rentable. the type of affordable housing, the Housing Needs Survey did ask various questions. The one question it didn't ask, and this is discussed in the report at paragraph paragraph 15, the survey contained limited data on the desired size of the dwellings, so there was no information that I could find in terms of the preferred unit sizes that the prospective occupants required. And I noted that, but on balance, when considering all the other factors of the Housing Needs Survey that demonstrated that there was a need, and the scope of the survey and the constraints of the parish boundaries and everything else, that there was likely to be sufficient need for at least four one-bedroom units. So whilst it might not be demonstrating the need that the council has identified in the wider area of the parish, there is a need that would be taken up by people for one-bedroom units. And the final issue is the cumulative impacts. The other reason for refusal. If I can just, in brief terms, just go to the reasons for refusal. The character issue of the development was a reason for refusal. They've made minor modifications to the scheme, including a lowering of the height and an increased front setback. And on balance, it does fit appropriately within the street scheme. There are two-storey dwellings to the northern side of the road, so it's not sufficient to warrant refusal on those grounds. Car parking has been changed from allocated to unallocated, so that makes it policy compliant. There's been nothing more than that to resolve that issue.
Why is that? Sorry.
Sorry?
Why does making it unallocated make it okay, compliant, when if they were allocated they wouldn't be? What's the difference? I know what the difference is between the two, but yeah, why?
There is a different generation rate for the location, so it's a village location, and there's a different generation rate because in theory the spaces would be not made unavailable just because they're assigned to a specific unit. So if anybody turns up at any time, there is a space available. It's not assigned to a specific unit. So that's why there are different generation rates for affordable versus for allocated and unallocated parking spaces. Reason for refusal 6, ecology details were provided. Reason for refusal 8 was boundary treatments. It is acknowledged now that the permitted development requirements would allow this type of fencing in this area, and it is supplemented by landscape screening, hedgerow. So that reason for refusal was resolved.
Okay, the other questions I've got are for Chris Annington. The quote you've been quoting tonight is about paragraph 175 of the MPPF and the British Standard. I've been reading up on all this stuff today with the idea that I would question you on all these things, and you've pretty much answered all the questions already. But I just want to kind of reiterate something. Will this building work, do you think, cause a deterioration of this tree? I think you've clearly said that already, but I just want to make clear you are absolutely sure this tree is going to deteriorate if this is allowed to go ahead.
Yes. I'm sure this tree will deteriorate as a result of the works as proposed. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
My other question, I've got another couple. You mentioned that the MPPF talks of these trees being irreplaceable. Do you consider this tree yourself, in your opinion, to be irreplaceable?
I consider it to be a veteran tree, and veteran trees, says that they're irreplaceable. Look, if you wait long enough, we're talking, probably about 150 years, you might get something similar if you're lucky, but you'd have to plant a lot of trees to do it, because there's studies in the United States in woodland that suggest that only 1 in 100 trees in a woodland will get to be is it 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000? I think it's 1 in 100. Let's go for 1 in 100. We'll get to be 100 years old. This tree's probably sort of the middle of Queen Victoria's reign, so 150, 60, 70 years old. And that's a rough calculation. Don't quote me too much on it, but let's say 150 years old. So that's how long you've got to wait, and you've got to plant at least 100 or more of them, and then you've got to watch them slowly deteriorate and not die. So lingering on with all these features that make them important for wildlife and ecology, and in a prominent position on a road, in a gateway to the village, I think you'd have to plant an awful lot of trees and wait an awful long time, and then you might get something similar, but you can't guarantee it. So pretty much irreplaceable, yes.
Okay, and my final question is kind of something you haven't touched on really, but seems to be in the British standards. The onus for demonstrating that this tree would remain viable and in an okay position, it is on the applicant to demonstrate, isn't it?
Absolutely correct. Yes, and it does say in the British Standard, I think it's talking about root protection areas, but it does say that the applicant's tree consultant should demonstrate. You're quite right. Should demonstrate no harm, not us demonstrating harm. But of course, we've shown already, as you kindly said, that the British Standard and the supplementary planning guidance, the government's planning guidance on ancient and veteran trees would support our view on harm as well. So yeah, but you're absolutely right. The onus is on the applicant, and I think that this idea of radar is probably the way forward to just determine where the roots actually are. They're clearly not in a rectangular box. And they're probably not in a circle either. But it's a way of doing it that hasn't been looked at.
Yeah, okay. I just a final comment from me, really. I mean, affordable housing is the big thing I want, and if it's affordable housing, it's usually got my seal of approval. But I think you've convinced me that this isn't. And my reading of the MPPF has convinced me that they haven't gone far enough to prove that tree is not going to be damaged. And it's a huge store of carbon, and like you say, replacing it is going to take 150 years, and we don't have 150 years. So I'm definitely minded to vote and support the refusal, should I say. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
I think myself that this radar, whatever it is an attractive way forward, because I'm not sure about the tree. I'm perfectly happy with the affordable housing, and it's an excellent scheme. With no tree there, we'd have approved this an hour ago. Perhaps the officers can just think how if we did want to defer, whether that would be possible to carry as this radar investigation, and how long would a suitable deferral be? And if that's not possible, whether we would in fact be better refusing it. But I'd just like to hear from Gary and Rochelle in the meantime. So Gary, please.
Thank you. The council highway officers and the agents consultants are in complete opposites. And the difficulty I've got is that the report really just talked of potential harm. But in the debate, there's all sorts of things that have been raised that were not really considered earlier. Ground radar is the classic. And I accept the fact now that the responsibility is on the agent to deal with this in one way or another. I was actually thinking that we could perhaps condition it to that development shall not take place until the council approve a condition designed to protect the tree roots. Now, whether that's one way of dealing with it, or whether your view on maybe deferring it while this is looked into is the other, I'm not terribly sure, but I'm open to comment from other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Rochelle.
Permeable paving. Wouldn't permeable paving actually allow water to get through, nutrients to get through to the tree on top of through the car park? Because I can say that permeable paving is helping very much on several trees around us here in my area, and the trees are thriving. So I'm not quite sure that just because we put paving over something, if it's permeable, why can't the water go through and why can't that help the tree? I'm not sure if it would actually be a problem or not. And I really do believe we do need affordable homes. And I think that could be a priority as well, because I don't think that Finch Hempstead is known for being affordable normally. And I'm sorry that I think affordable homes trumps almost anything at most points. I'm asking, well, can the officers please tell us what permeable paving would do and how much would that improve the health of the tree versus not having permeable paving?
I think the point is that the roots are, the contention is the roots are under the house, would be under the house. I think that's
not what they're showing on their maps.
No,
so that's
Chris, you just clarify.
I can clarify. Yes, the house is, or the flats are shown within the root protection area. That is, just clarify, is the minimum root protection area specified by the British Standard, and also within the buffer zone specified by Natural England and Historic England as well. So permeable paving, if the levels are correct, might help, and if the damage to the roots, which might result from any changes to the drain, to the ditch for drainage purposes, which are yet unresolved, that also could be an issue. And on the issue of affordable housing, that's not my area, but obviously there is part of this site that might be developed. It's just not the larger area shown in the current proposals, which does impinge upon the root protection area. And you're right, Mr. Chairman, it is the flats themselves are also within the root protection area.
Thank you. Okay, Rochelle. So Malcolm.
Just a very quick point, Chairman. How do you demonstrate a negative? How do you demonstrate that there is no harm? This tree might be fine with the apartments there and no evidence and no visibility of it. And then in 82 years' time, somebody says there's a bit of damage on that tree. You know, how do you demonstrate a negative? Because in 80 odd years, you can say, see, it did cause damage, but it took 80 or 90 years to prove it. I can't see how it's an impossible thing to prove, really, if that's the onus on the applicant, because unless there's a reasonable timescale or some evidence you can get from somewhere, it's almost impossible to prove that, surely.
Yeah, I think that's right. We have to look at probabilities here, really.
So if I could just help, it's just about following the guidance which has been tested in other areas and in other examples. And there may be examples where permeable paving has been used, but perhaps not adjacent to a veteran tree, which is a very special and unique kind of tree.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I would like to propose a deferral to carry out further research into radar to get a better idea of where the roots are and to give us a better idea whether damage is likely to occur or not. I don't know whether that's a deferral or a refusal, really. And if it's a deferral, how long would a deferral be for? It's rather a technical question. The officers think.
So we had a case in Sonning where if I'm right, the turnaround was a couple of months to get ground penetrating radar results. So a couple of months should be adequate, I would have thought, for the applicant to get GPR results.
Okay, would that be in planning terms? Is that sound, Justin or Simon?
Yeah, Chairman. Obviously, it's a difficult on balance decision. So I think you're right to want to make it with all the evidence that you can garner. So actually, I think it's a sensible suggestion if the applicant's willing to extend the time to deal with the application.
Okay. Do you have a form of words, including the word radar?
I think, Chairman, you're minded to defer to allow further investigative work to be carried out in relation to the protected tree.
Yes. Do you need to include radar to indicate what we would expect to be done at least?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we can say radar work if that's.
That's only my view at the moment. Is there a seconder for that?
I'm prepared to second that, Chairman.
Oh,
and I
thank you.
think it's just up to the applicant to provide the information to persuade the tree officer that it's acceptable risk. So I don't see the need for the word radar, but I would second the idea.
Okay, Simon, you got your hand up?
I was just going to add that they are a charity, so I wonder whether it was worth putting it back to them whether they're willing to incur that cost. It is a charitable organisation. It's not for profit, so it might be worth raising it with them.
Not quite sure what to do about that.
Surely, Chairman, if they're not prepared to do it, then the application falls.
But what about the affordable homes in that area? The lack of them.
Yeah, so sorry, Chairman, if you were minded to defer, obviously we'd enter into further discussions with the applicant. If it turned out that they were unwilling or unable to do further works, then we'd take the report back to you with the recommendation unaltered.
Okay, Chris, you got your hand up still?
So yeah, if I could just raise one other issue, well, 2 points. One, there is part of the site that might be developed that is probably outside the root protection area, but certainly outside the British standard minimum root protection area. But what we also need to consider is the government's guidance on veteran trees, which gives this buffer zone, which is a non-developed area. They say not gardens. Maybe a redesign including gardens might be acceptable, but the guidance is not gardens. So it's not just the root protection area, which the ground penetrating radar would help us address, but it is also this 15-metre buffer zone, which does take us still into the current proposed building, but might be avoided by a redesign. So, of course, that would mean another. Well, I'll let the planning officer tell you what that means.
Yeah, so best negotiations between the officers and the applicant, and then whatever results comes back to maybe not the next planning committee meeting, one after that perhaps. I don't see anybody else who wishes to speak with an alternative suggestion. So can I see those who are prepared to vote for that proposal for deferral, please? I've got 5. That's me, Andrew, Angus, Carl. Oh, 4. Someone dropped out. Okay. So 4. So I've got me, Andrew, Angus, and Carl. Anybody else? In case this is not quite working. There's nobody else who wants to vote.
I think Gary, Chairman.
I've got Gary now. So that's 5. So if we 5 put our hands down. Malcolm. And those against? Abdul?
I was voting last minute for the deferral, Chairman.
Yeah, we're voting on the deferral, yes.
Yes, I did put my hand up for a deferral, but it was just as you told everybody to switch them off. So I'm actually counting on the deferral ones, your previous count for the deferrals.
We have 6 then, Callum, do we?
Yes, you've got Malcolm, yourself, Gary, Angus, Andrew, and Carl.
Right, so against, I've got Abdul. Is that correct, Abdul? I guess so. And if you put your hand down, Abdul, well, the rest are will be abstentions. Okay, so that deferral is carried. So the application is deferred for further work, and we hope it comes back to the committee soon. So move on to application number 25, which is land at Fishponds Road, Wokingham in Evandon's ward, and page 93. And Baldi Pulahi is the case officer. Good evening, and please can we have your report?
Thank you. Can everybody see?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is for the application at Fish Ponds Estate at Fish Ponds Road. It's for the erection of a building consisting of a storage facility and 2 industrial units with associated hard standing and soft landscaping following the demolition of units 720 and 721 Millers Business Park. This is the current location plan, which shows the existing building on site. There are residential units opposite. Northwest of the site is the nursing home and the surrounding industrial units within the estate. The proposed site layout, which shows the location, the positioning of the proposed building, car parking and landscaping. And as you can see, the proposed facility will maintain sufficient separation distances to the adjacent sites, including the nursing home. The proposed building will have a maximum ridge height of 10.5 metres. The building will provide 3 stories of self-storage, including a reception area and 2 industrial units on the ground floor. It is of a contemporary design, built form and appearance, which will not detract from the existing industrial estate. The proposed ground floor, which again, as mentioned, it will have the 2 industrial units on this floor, continuing onto the first floor, continuing onto the second floor. This is the existing site facing onto Molly Millers Lane, and another view of the existing site which looks further down Molly Millers Lane. This is a 3D visual of the proposed facility. As you can see, it will be an improvement of what is existing on site at the moment. And another 3D view of the proposed facility in context with the existing adjacent sites and the industrial unit. You can see the positioning of the facility, the car parking and the landscaping. Again, as you can see, the scale, design and mass will not cause any harm to the industrial unit in terms of character or cause a detrimental impact on the surrounding street scene. Subject to the legal agreement and conditions set out in the officer's report and the members' update, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have just one speaker, Mr. Hempsel. I'm sorry, I don't have your first name, Mr. Hempsel, but
hello there.
Good evening.
Of C4 Projects. I'm part of the design team. I'll be representing the applicant for development on Fish Pond Road. The existing site is occupied by 2 buildings of a size comparable to that of the proposed development. One of the existing units has been empty for over 4 years, and both units are now in need of significant repair. The proposed development is set back from the existing building line and includes for the installation of a new 4-metre wide landscaping strip along the main frontage, which will increase the number of trees on the site following the committee feedback. The proposed development satisfies policy CP15 of the core strategy by providing additional Class B floor space, while in accordance with paragraph 80 of the National Planning Policy Framework, it also provides an opportunity to support economic growth and productivity. The proposal is of a contemporary design, as mentioned earlier, and is situated within an existing industrial estate where it will represent a high quality addition to the estate's gateway site. In doing so, the proposal aims to set a benchmark for quality of design within the immediate area. Keen attention has been paid to reducing the floor heights in order to minimise the building's overall impact on its surroundings following the pre-application comments. A site section of the building has also been submitted to demonstrate that the building mass is lower than the neighbouring Alexandra Grange nursing home. The applicant is committed to providing a sustainable development and has incorporated the following into their design: a minimum of 70 kilowatt photovoltaic array, high efficiency LED lighting with intelligent controls throughout, enhanced building fabric U values and air permeability rates, and 4 electric car charge points. In summary, the key benefits of this proposal are regeneration of the Gateway site to an existing industrial estate, direct job creation during the construction and operation, business opportunities for the local people within the development, enhanced landscaping and visual appearance of the site and immediate area. The proposed parking provision also meets the required parking standards. The building's use class is fitting for its location and in accordance with planning policies. The building will also provide a minimum of 35% reduction in carbon emissions through renewal and low carbon technologies, and that is actually a significant improvement that's actually stated on the draft conditions, which is 10%. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hepsell. Right, members, I just draw your attention to the fact that there are no adverse representations. A few comments from Woking Town Council, nothing from neighbours or ward members. But it's over to you, and it's Angus first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I know that we're very keen to find residential developments, but I'm delighted to see that one part of Fish Ponds and Molly Millers is looking to be, if we approve this, retained to be commercial. And as the representative has just said, it's very much a key gateway site. I've just got one question for the officers. As we're now in September and we have the new use classes order, should we at least make note that this in fact falls into, I believe, Class E now?
It's a very good spot, Angus. So the situation for applications submitted before September is that for the purposes of the application, you refer to the old use classes order. But we can add an informative to remind the applicant that the use classes order has changed since the application was submitted.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to begin by echoing Angus's comments regarding the benefits of bringing commercial premises such as these back into use. But I am very mindful of the location of this site close to a large care home. So I have two questions for officers. Firstly, could officers confirm that the site shares a boundary with Alexandra Grange? And what will be the minimum separation distance between the new building and the care home? And are there any special regulations regarding separation distances where care homes or very similar kinds of facilities are involved? And then secondly, clarification regarding the self-storage building. Which of the two buildings in the plan on page 115 is the proposed self-storage? On page 102, it's stated that hours of use shall be restricted, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. weekdays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturdays. Page 108 states the car park is susceptible to overnight parking because the self-storage unit is open 24 hours. Could officers please clarify this? And the reason, again, why I'm asking is in relation to its proximity to the care home. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the separation distances to the care home, so at the narrowest point it's 6.7 meters and at the widest point it's 12.1 meters. In terms of the hours, so the self-storage facility is a 24-hour facility. However, the applicant has said in their design and access statement that that would be only for certain users, so not all users of the self-storage will have the 24-hour access. In terms of the parking comments and in terms of those comments about the overnight parking, etc., these were comments brought in by the crime prevention officer in terms of safety, and conditions 8 to 11 do cover those points.
And could you just confirm which of the two buildings would be the self-storage? Is it the one closest to the care home or the one farthest from it?
It will be the one closest to the care home.
Thank you.
I think Andrew wanted to know whether there were special rules for separation distances if a care home was involved, which is the case here.
To my knowledge, no, but if Justin might want to.
No, there isn't a special distance.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to call Simon in because he hasn't spoken at all. Not in debate, anyway. Simon.
Okay, thank you. Just a very quick point, really, for Justin. Justin, did I just understand you to say that the rules we should apply were those prevailing when the planning application was submitted?
Yes, so for the purposes of the use classes order, for applications submitted prior to September, you are considering them under the old use classes and any conditions you put on. So, for example, if it was a retail shop and you said it had to remain A1, you would be conditioning it to remain A1 rather than the new E class.
How does that work with the fact that at previous planning committees we've been told very specifically that when there's been a change of policy, that we must apply the policy that is prevailing on the date of the decision, not the policy when the submission was made? I'm just trying to get clarity.
It does in terms of your consideration of it against policy, but in terms of how the application is dealt with, in terms of what you're approving, it's dealt with currently under the old use class until applications coming forward from the 1st of September this year.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Gary, we haven't heard from you, I think. Please, Gary.
I'm still here.
Yep.
Looking at the plans, I can see that it's quite some distance from the care home, and it seems to be a green area with a 2.4 metre fence all along that side and some sort of external seating area for a small number of staff, I assume. So that seems pretty well okay. The only thing I would have a concern with is out of hours noise if there are out of hours deliveries, in the sense that the bays nearest to the care home, the two bays nearest to there, could be subject to noise. And the reason I raise that point is we've had quite significant issues with in Lower Early with ASDA and nighttime deliveries, and I just wanted some sort of an assurance as to how out of hours or late hours deliveries will be handled. It's really, is there likely to be a noise impact that might affect the care home? I'm perfectly happy with the plans. I just need to get that point clarified.
There is a noise assessment plan, I think, and there are no noisy vehicles. That's correct.
That's fine, thank you.
I think that's correct, but Baldeep, is it not?
No, sorry, I was just going to say that in terms of the noise, obviously a noise assessment was submitted and the environmental health officer are satisfied there'd be no undue noise disturbances towards the occupier of their care home. There's no indication of any out of hours delivery, but I'm sure the client will confirm that in the travel plan. That's obviously again subject to condition.
Thank you. Carl.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate what people have been saying. It's additional employment, additional Class B space at the moment, and it's even got PV panels on the roof, so everything's great. And the even better thing is, which Angus alluded to and Andrew mentioned, we've got something in Molly Millers that's being converted back into industrial in some way and not a conversion to residential. So yeah, it's got my seal of approval. Cheers.
Thank you. Angus.
Sorry, Chairman, I didn't take my hand down.
That's okay. Rochelle.
I think it's a great idea to have more industrial in Fish Ponds Road. I also would like to ask about the number of trees they're planning on planting along Molly Miller's Lane. It would be very nice for them. They've said they're planting trees. It'd be nice if they have a whole row of trees, because there's actually residential property across the street from there, and it'd be nice to have them look at trees rather than looking at a car park.
Yes, regarding the trees aspect, as discussed and as the client has mentioned, the landscaping plan will be subject to condition. They have taken on board the comments regarding additional trees, but again, that is all subject to condition. So when that may come in subject to the approval, that will be looked at more at length.
Can we have an informative then to ask them to please plant some trees all along Molly Miller's Lane? Would that be possible? Chris?
I don't know, is that reasonable?
It seems like they say they want to plant trees, so if you can ask if they can plant trees along there, that would be nice. It's just an informative, which you realize is not exactly enforceable, but just something we'd like to see.
I'm sure we can put something in there, can we?
Justin?
Yeah, yes, it's reasonable to have an informative saying something along the lines that members would anticipate the landscaping condition to include additional tree planting along the frontage.
Okay, and Malcolm.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, there are no side views, profiles of the building, only planned from the top. So I can't tell if there's any windows along that side of the building facing the care home. I would imagine if it's a warehousing thing, it probably won't have any windows there. It'll be just big brick wall, in which case that would limit any noises escaping out of doors and windows towards the care home. And if I look at the plan on whatever page it is, one of them, the loading bays appear to be on the two smaller blocks, the other end of the building. And the loading bay or entry bay on the bit adjacent to the care home, the loading bay there is in the centre of the building away from it. So all the big entrances are on the opposite side away from the care home. And once you get into these storage things, I've been in to see some of them, they're generally all solid walls. I don't know if there are going to be any windows down the side facing the care home. Do we know that from the plans at all? Because that would be the biggest risk of noise, but if there's no windows, it shouldn't be.
Sorry, the plans don't indicate there will be side-facing windows towards the care home.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, as I said, the plans submitted don't indicate any side-facing windows.
Okay, good. So, in fact, that would also be a reason why there wouldn't be much noise going towards the care home anyway, because the loading bays are at the other end and there's not massive doors and windows facing the care home. So I'm happy with that. The second point as a comment is that I'm also happy to see an employment-based organisation staying in Molly Miller's Lane, because that is quite an important area for employment within the town area. So I'm in favour of that. And with all the screening and the adequate parking, I think it's a good idea. So I'll be voting in favour of this.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anyone with an alternative proposal. We have amendments to conditions 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11 in the members' update, and that one informative about trees. So,
Chris?
Yep.
It was mentioned earlier, I think Justin mentioned it, perhaps an informative reminding the applicant that the class usage has the class order has changed. I don't know if that's one that is also being included.
Oh, I missed that. Okay, is that correct, Justin?
I'd mentioned it. I'm not sure it's necessary in reality. I'm sure the applicant is aware, but we can add it for safety if you like.
I'm sure he's listening to this.
Yes, Chris, can I just make a comment? I printed out the change of use regulations earlier this week from the planning portal, and it basically says from September the 1st onwards, they all change to Class E and so on. These A, Bs and Cs become Class E. However, any planning application submitted before the 1st of September 2020, the use classes in effect when the application was submitted will be used to determine the application.
Yeah, I think we might have touched on that before.
Just confirming it, but I've printed it out as well. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we go to the recommendation with page. on page 94, and that's subject to an employment skills plan being produced as well. So recommendation on page 94, changes to those conditions I mentioned. One, informative, not including the informative change of use rules. So can I see those members in favour of this, of approving this application, please? Two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. That is approved unanimously. And now the last application this evening is 201370, which is 20 Pitts Lane in Early on page 129. And Senjuti Mana is the case officer. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Let me share my screen with you. Could you please let me know if you can see it?
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. So this application is 2013-70, and this is an outline proposal for the erection of one number 2-story dwelling of use class C3 with access layout and scale to be determined. It is presented to the committee because it has been called in by Councillor Boet. So this is the site location plan. The site is located to the front of an existing gospel hall. And Pitts Lane is predominantly residential neighborhood with only 2 non-residential buildings within the immediate area. So one is the Gospel Hall and the other one is a social club on the adjoining plot. This is the aerial photograph of the site and its surrounding. The eastern boundary of the plot at 20 Pitts Lane is located within designated site of urban landscape value, which starts from here, this area. And the application site is, however, more than 35 meters from the SULV. Also, it can be seen that the linear pattern of residential development along Pitts Lane is broken near the application site. And these dwellings have a smaller front garden compared to the dwellings on the other side of the application site. This is the photo of the site from Pitts Lane before the removal of the electric pylon, which has been removed in January 2020. So this is the photo, the current photo of the site. And this is the photo of the site from inside the plot. This exposed soil area is where the pylon used to be in the past. These are the photos of the immediate street scene on either side of the application site. Now this slide shows the proposed site layout. The new dwelling will be 2-story height and will maintain an average of at least 6 meters deep front garden. The new dwelling would be sited behind the principal elevation line of the neighboring property number 18 and will not impinge on the daylight received by the rear habitable windows of the neighboring property. This has been demonstrated with the help of a 45-degree line. Now, one of the primary concerns raised by local residents was the inconsistency of the proposal with surrounding building lines. Now, as can be seen, the new dwelling would be behind the principal elevation line of the neighboring property at 18. Additionally, as this aerial photograph shows, there is no consistent building line in the immediate neighborhood, and the front gardens vary in terms of depth. It can also be seen that the grass verge in the front along the footway varies in depth. So the application site has a deeper grass verge compared to the neighboring properties. The proposal is considered to be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood in terms of dwelling type, building height, scale, and off-road provision of parking. The parking for Gospel Hall at the rear is already approved under application 200-564. Comments were made regarding possible noise disturbances from for the future occupiers arising from the social club next door. The proposed dwelling would be more than 25 meters forward of this social club building, and more than 40 meters of separation distance will be maintained. So this is considered acceptable separation distance and no negative impact is considered. Additionally, there are existing properties closer to the club compared to the proposed dwelling, and for these reasons, the noise disturbance is not considered a major issue. So based on this, it is recommended that, subject to conditions set out in the officer report, the application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got two speakers here in person. First of all, we have Andrew Beard, who is the agent who will be speaking in favour of the application. Mr. Beard, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Andrew Beard, MRTPI, and the agent. Don't really need to say much following that presentation, really, do I? Previously, there was an application for two houses. That was withdrawn to resolve a lot of the issues, which has resulted in this one house. And as you've just heard, is fully acceptable. It's an urban settlement site. It's therefore sustainable location, compliant with national and local policies. The removal of the electric pylons delivers a frontage site. There is a gap in the street scene with the church and the social club. And this gap, I feel, should be made full and effective use of. That's the principle of sustainable development in urban settlements. The new house reflects the context of the linear houses fronting Pitts Lane, and it retains frontage landscaping as a hedge and a front garden. It will actually enhance the street scene. It will remove that untidy gap. It's not forward of the building line, and the diagrams that you've just seen clearly show this both on your screen and in the report. The house will not impact on the neighbour's amenity, given its setting adjacent, it's flank to flank. It preserves the 45-degree privacy lines. Its height and its character is fully in accordance with the street. There has been some concern that was brought to committee regarding parking. Well, the house will have 3 car parking spaces built at the back of the rear garden. That's fully in line with policy, fully compliant. The other issue was, well, how does the house actually integrate with the church to the behind? Well, it works in 2 scenarios. Firstly, the existing hall has 12 car parking spaces, plus the 3 for the house is 15. There is a permission to put a first floor on the hall, and in that permission, as has been said, there is 16 car parking spaces, and then with the 3 we'll give 19. Those parking spaces to the rear can't be objected to because of this house, because they already have planning permission. So there cannot be any objection to the impact on the urban landscape value area. In conclusion, therefore, both the house and the hall can coexist satisfactorily without any detriment to access parking. There are no grounds to not approve this application. And lastly, I would just thank the officers for the consultation and acceptance of the recommendation, which I hope you will support tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beard. And we also have Tim Marsh, who is going to speak against the application. Mr. Marsh, please.
I've got the microphone on, so that should be it. Yes, I represent ASA, the Local Residents Association. This application is for a Class 3 dwelling, which can be a small religious community or up to 6 adults. 4 bedrooms are shown, and it is reasonable to expect a minimum of 4 cars plus visitor parking, but there's only allocation for 3 cars. Now, parking on Pitts Lane is not safe or feasible. Therefore, the additional cars will need to park directly outside the dwelling on the roadway. Parking on this private road, therefore, needs to be agreed by the landlord. Location. All the properties on this side of Pitts Lane are set well back from their boundaries. The inset location plan, which has been shown, shows the relative position of the site to the existing houses, but omits the dwelling under consideration. I'm going to try and insert a drawing for you, figure 1. Does that come up on your screen?
No. Not for
No.
me anyway.
No, not for me either.
Still see you. You have to share your screen.
Still see me. I've clicked the share thing.
You then need to select the document you wish to share.
Thank you. It's figure 1.
Members, these were just in case Mr. Marsh can't show them. These were circulated via email to all of you earlier.
Are we there yet? Did the members see any diagrams yet?
No.
Doesn't appear so.
I wonder if I can perhaps read out Councillor Boyd's submission. Would that be helpful to give you a bit more time?
Okay.
Oh, you've got something now.
All right.
Oh, an Outlook.
An appointment.
Sorry. I don't know what's going on here.
Well, let me leave that with you, and I'll read the third submission out, if I may. The third speaker. This application was listed by Councillor Shirley Boyd, who's the local member. She can't be here, or she can't be online with us this evening. So I'm going to read out what she has written. Could you switch your mic off, Mr. Marsh?
Certainly.
Thank you. The existing dwellings in Pitts Lane are set well back from the road, creating an open area aspect. A building line may not exist per se, but there is a convention which should be followed. The proposed dwelling will dominate the street scene, particularly when approaching from the east. The prevalent roof style for this side of Pitts Lane is for a hipped end. The gable end on the main roof on the proposed dwelling will add to the overbearing effect on the street scene and for the residents of number 18. My main concern, however, is parking. Only 3 spaces when potentially 6 car owners could live in the property. And where will visitors park? In the absence of any alternative, they will park on grass verges, resulting in irreparable damage to the verges, as we've seen in other roads in Whitegates. The Gospel Hall has a large car park, which is used infrequently. This dwelling is obviously of some benefit to the owners of the hall. Therefore, it is they, rather than the neighbouring householders, who should bear the burden of accommodating the extra cars. I request that the committee attaches a condition to the consent, should it be given, requiring the owner to take responsibility for the parking on the access road or in its car park. So that's the end of Councillor Boyd's submission. No. I should be able to read your. I think I have a copy of what you sent, Mr. Marsh.
Well, I've got. I can read the words. It's just whether the members have got the drawing, which figure 2, which is particularly poignant, which I believe was emailed them earlier.
Yes, yes.
Perhaps they could kindly refer to it. And while I speak, I do apologise for this, but I'm new to the system, and it doesn't appear to work at the moment. So. Right, we take a closer look in figure 2. You can see that the distance between number 18 and his boundary is 8.5 metres, whereas the proposed distance between number 20 and the boundary is only 4.5 metres. 1/3 of the mass of number 20 is in front of the prevailing building line, and there is a prevailing building line, as you can see from figure 1 and figure 2. This 2-storey building will therefore jut out and be very noticeable, especially at the bend in the road. This location problem is further compounded by its relationship with number 18. The centre line of number 20 is set behind the rear wall of number 18 and dominates its garden. Number 18 has justifiably complained that this will affect the light into his garden. Now, to move number 20 further back, behind the building line would make the loss of light worse for number 18. So we have a problem here. Now, in our figure 3, there is a possible solution, which is to align the front of number 20 with the road and adopt sloping hip bend roofs. This would both maintain the building line and reduce the dominance of number 18 by number 20. So, gentlemen and ladies, we have a situation where it's not satisfactory to us. The Borough Design Guide, section 2, refers to CP3 and says that development has to be responding appropriately to existing character and identity of the area and relating well to neighbours. This application does not fit in and should be refused.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. Right, local members, members. Carl, you're the local member here on the committee, so you can go first, please.
Carl, Carl, just before you jump in, Mr. Marsh, at the top of your screen, can you click stop sharing? Fire away, Carl, whilst Mr. Marsh.
Okay, yeah, I've got a few questions. I just want to get confirmation that the parking of 3 spaces is compliant with what we need, and also do we have a parking allocation for HMOs in WBC? And the reason I ask that is that lots of houses not too far away from where Pitts Lane is, mainly behind it, are being converted to HMOs, obviously permitted development rights to do that. But obviously we don't get any say on what changes any parking and so on. So kind of my view is that obviously if it's compliant with policy, it's compliant, and there's nothing we can do right now. But for the future, we need to be getting the consideration that these buildings could be HMOs and applying higher limits to them. But so I just need that confirmed, really, that the parking allocation is correct.
Okay, get an answer to that one.
Yes, the parking is at this moment, the proposal is for a 4-bedroom family home, and 3 parking spaces are policy compliant for that kind of a development. And we need to determine the application based on as it has been applied for, and we cannot really predict what's going to happen in future, unfortunately. So at this moment, the parking is policy compliant based on the proposal.
I'll take your point, Sanju. So you're quite right. I just I can predict what will happen, but obviously that's irrelevant to the planning issues. There's on page 137, the representations, there's when early town council recommended this should be refused. They put a kind of proviso in there that said until such time as the parking amendments approved under 200564 are implemented, and that's the extension of the Gospel Hall and obviously the parking. Now the officer note below that, responding to that, says that parking has been secured by condition on that application, but those aren't the same things, are they? The parking implemented and secured by condition. So I just wonder whether you could comment on whether that's a valid thing for them to be asking. And the another question, okay, if you can answer that one first, and I'll come to this other one in a minute because they're related to some others.
Yeah, sure. So the proposal at 200564 is for an extension of the Gospel Hall, for which we would require extra parking, and that has been secured by using condition 2 and 7. However, if the applicant doesn't implement that permission, then the existing parking is more than sufficient. So as such, this particular request actually doesn't influence the current proposal. However, probably the highways officer, Roger, would be in a better position to answer to that. Roger, please. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, what Sanjuti says is right. And I mean, for a 4-bedroom property, three parking spaces is adequate. And if anything, it's rare for a 4-bedroom house to have four cars parked outside. I mean, it does happen, obviously. But I mean, if there was a a requirement for or say a visitor came round, they wanted another parking space, I think it's more likely they would park adjacent to the house rather than on the road, because the road is actually the access road is 5 meters wide, and you only really need just over 2 meters to get a car past. So there's plenty of room, and I think that's more likely where someone would park. And if not there, the 3 cars parking spaces that are shown, the road behind the back of the parking spaces is 6.3 meters wide. So I think there's a chance that they park across there. Even I mean, I think it's unlikely that they actually park on the main road.
Okay, thanks. I'll take the point. The point you made about, you're not going to get many houses with 4 cars. I can show you plenty of houses within 100 yards of this site where that is happening, but they are HMOs though, so it's a different thing.
Well, there's also lots of 4-bedroom houses without more than 3 cars.
Yeah, I'll take that point.
It's compliant with policy. That's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. I've accepted it. I'm just trying to make the point that that we don't have a policy around HMOs. Right, gardens I want to talk about now. The applicant states that the house is provided with large front and rear garden private amenity space. Is that true? I don't think it is. The rear garden is 18 metres long, but that's covering less than half the width of the house. And the other part is by my guesstimate, because the figures aren't on the site plan, it's probably 6 or 7 metres from the rear of the house to the boundary fence. So that seems a very small back garden for a 4-bed house to me. And the front garden, I think the only thing it mentions about the dimensions are that the front of the house is an average of 6 metres from the front boundary, because obviously it's cutting right across, which is what's creating the problem that Mr. Marsh refers to, I think, in terms of this looking very overbearing in its position and it being forward of the building line. So there really isn't the space to get this 4-bedroom house in this plot, I don't think. So I just to know whether we think those gardens are reasonable size, and if anyone could confirm the actual dimensions of the front garden, that would be good.
So for the rear garden, the Borough Design Guide suggests that within the built-up area, we can expect anything 11 meters or above as acceptable garden depth. So 18 meters in a considerable width is, I think, policy compliant, and I don't think we can refuse the application because of that. And as for the front garden, as I have mentioned, it's average of 6 meters depth. So in the middle of the plot, it's 8 meters, and then further down, it's much deeper. So at the worst case, it's 4 and 4.5 meters, if I can remember on top of my head. Now, there is no policy requirement for the front garden. However, this area has a kind of a feel of openness. The front gardens of the neighboring properties contribute to that. Now, this particular application site has a very wide grass verge in front of it, and which is not the case for the properties, say number 16 doesn't have such a wide verge. So overall, when you take it from the street frontage or street edge of Pitts Lane to the front of the middle of the house, so it's about 16.5 meters of setback, which is consistent with the other buildings of this area. So overall, the openness of this area, I don't think it's going to be impacted by the proposal. So the front garden, even though it may not be as deep as the neighboring property, I think overall it's on balance, it should be okay. And I don't think the building is going to be intrusive feature within the street scene.
Okay, I do disagree with you with respect. I think it will be. I think it isn't set back anywhere near as much as the other houses in the street, as I think Mr. Marsh's diagram indicated. I just want to make a quick point. I think the agent mentioned the SULV, and I recognise that what happened there was that was a separate application. I don't think parking should ever be on an SULV. I know that the WBC disagree and often put parking on it. But if that had been refused on that basis, then this site would never have come forward, and we wouldn't be here talking about it, which would be a good thing, I think. But that said, it's nothing to do with this application. Any overspill of parking is going to end up on the verges. It's going to be a problem for there, and that is a very busy road. And I don't think the building line is. I agree that the building line isn't set here. It's not consistent everywhere, but this house is effectively going to be stuck out on a corner, effectively, I think. And the rear garden's too small, despite it's 80 metres in one part, but it's not all over it. Yeah, I'm minded to refuse it. I mean, I'll listen to what everybody else has got to say since I'm the first person, but yeah, I'm minded to refuse it.
Thank you. Rochelle.
Sorry. The brethren apparently have been very good neighbors in Embrook, and they're not overspilling their car parking anyplace. And a lot of people were very dubious about what was going to happen there. And to my mind, they're probably just going to house some of their own people in one of these, in this house. Why would they build a house there? I don't think they're going to make it into an HMO. I don't think they're going to sell it off. They seem like a very quiet bunch, is about the only thing I can say. I can't see any reason really to refuse this house at this point. It would be nice to know if they were planning to use it for some of their people. I don't know if we can ask that or not. Can we ask the officer?
I don't think, I don't have that information with me at this moment. I can check if necessary, but I don't think that should be, that should influence our decision.
Can the agent actually answer that question then?
Well, I don't think it's not a planning matter, Rochelle. I think we need to get on and determine the applications.
Okay.
Thank you. Andrew.
Yes, thank you. I have quite a number of questions, and the first refers to the residential C3 use. Can we just confirm exactly which of the three C3 categories is being applied for? Is it, as I think Mr. Marsh suggested, C3C? Because he made specific reference to a small religious community. Now, the only reason why I raise this issue is that it may, have implications for the numbers of adults, living in such a house. There may, I don't know, be different parking standards for C3C, if that is, something that they may be wishing to apply for. Now, there are a lot of references in the report to the recently approved application relating to a church hall, which has been the only building on this plot and would share a boundary with this new residential dwelling. They include references to parking, including the overflow parking to the rear of the church hall, presumably in the hope that this would help to allay fears that parking for the house might sometimes be insufficient. But the red line delineating the site in this application does not include the plot on which the hall is located. Can officers clarify exactly what the relationship will be between the house and the church? Would the house remain in any way a part of the church, or would it be a completely separate legal entity? If it's the latter, then wouldn't that preclude residents and visitors to the house having access to parking on church grounds? Thirdly, can we confirm that the existing hedge at the front of the site is to be retained, and that the development would not reduce at all the depth of the existing grass verge, and whether or not the new home could have any impacts on the SULV? And finally, some of the nearby homes have very large front gardens. If approved, the front garden at this development would be considerably smaller than some nearby properties. Is there any danger that this might result in the home appearing to be out of character with the neighborhood, or draw even more visual attention to the building?
Right, thank you. I will try and answer to these questions in the order you have asked, but please let me know if I have missed anything. So as for the C3 use, it's not been mentioned in the application form whether it's a C1, C2 or C3, sorry, CA, CB or C3C. However, it's from the proposal, it appears that a single family dwelling of 4-bedroom. So that's how this application has been considered at this stage. And the relationship between the church at the back and the new dwelling in the front has been, the application has been considered as these two will be on two separate ownership, so that even if the church doesn't allow additional parking at the rear, the house should still have its sufficient off-road parking of its own. Now, as my colleague Roger has already explained, the property has got 3 off-road car parking spaces at the back, which is policy compliant, as well as the front access road is 5 meters wide. So that can also have additional parking if required, because you don't need 5-meter wide road for cars to pass. So the parking, I don't think is an issue here. For the protection of the existing hedge, landscape condition is already included if you're minded to approve it. So I think that should take care of the protection of the hedge in the front. The applicant has confirmed that this hedge will be retained. And the front garden, the depth of the front garden, it's already acknowledged that it's not as deep as some of the neighboring properties. However, because of the wide verge in front of the house, the overall openness, it will still be retained even after the dwelling is erected. So I think it's okay in terms of the frontage and the openness of the area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Gary, please.
Thank you. I carried out a site visit last week because I didn't know the area exactly, and I must admit I was quite surprised to see a fairly open street scene, both sides of the road, quite open and bright, and there was certainly a variable building line, so they were pretty obvious factors when I went there. The road is quite wide, and so are the pavements. The parking issue, a 4-bedroom house and 3 cars, is policy compliant. So I think that really has to end that matter. Carl's point about HMO parking is something we do have to look into. I mean, we allowed an 8-bedroom house on London Road with only 1 parking space on council-owned property. So I don't think we should be thinking whether 3 parking spaces compliant with policy in a 4-bedroom house is acceptable or not, because it clearly is. In the newer estates and fairly big substantial estates around the borough, 18-metre back gardens are way beyond the norm. They're much, much smaller than that, and most of the houses have no front gardens. So in context, what's been planned here is slightly at odds with the street scene, but it's not sufficiently at odds to make it unacceptable to me. So I'm actually minded to support the planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else wishes to speak, so no other proposal's been made, so I go to the recommendation on page 130. I see those in favour of approving this application. Please show. I've got 6. Me, Rochelle, Malcolm, Simon, Angus, Gary, Abdul. That's 7. Okay. it's gone back to 6 now. Okay, I've got me, Rochelle, Malcolm, Angus, Gary, Abdul.
And Simon's hand was up, Chair.
Oh, it's disappeared. It was up. Okay, I'll take that as 7. So if you can lower your hands, please. And those who wish to vote against, please show. That's Carl Andrew. That's 7-2. So that by 7 votes to 2, that application is approved. Thank you. I think I closed. Do I close the meeting now?
Yes, Chairman, unless there's anything on the members' update you wish to discuss.
Does anyone wish to discuss anything on the members' update?
The big thing was one of the decisions by the inspectors.
Yeah, thanks, Rochelle. There was only one thing I was going to mention, which was the Finch Hampstead Road appeal decision, which obviously was a significant one and was won very recently. It's very pleasing.
Okay, I don't know what. Have we lost?
We do have the land supply that we need, and they said that it wasn't no reason to do it.
Okay. I don't know whether Simon Weeks, did you want to say anything as chairman of the committee? You're not indicating, so I guess not.
No.
Okay, that's fine. So I therefore close the meeting. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.